Welcome to this Android tutorial. This tutorial is intended for software developers who have no time to lose and want to develop applications in the Android mobile environment. It will assume that you have some kind of experience with the Java programming language. How is it organized? Well, it's very pragmatic. We'll start coding very soon, and I will just introduce the different Android concepts when we need them. So let's start. So we are here to learn how to develop with Android. So I'll be kind of brief on the Android introduction. Let me say just that Google has announced the Open Handset Alliance and at the same time the availability of the Android platform in November 2007 when they released the very first Android software SDK. In the United States, 1 year later, T-Mobile has announced the very first Android mobile phone, the G1, so it was in October 2008. And since they have sold several hundreds of thousands. So what is this Open Handset Alliance? Of course, it's Google, but it's more than Google. There's more than there's 40 plus companies involved. We have handset telephone manufacturers like HTC, LG, Motorola, Samsung, but also mobile operators like China Mobile, Communication KDDI, Docomo, Sprint, Nextel, T-Mobile, Telecom Italia, Telefonica, also semiconductors companies like Audience, Broadcom, Intel, Nvidia and others, software companies including eBay, Nuance, Packet Video, and also commercialization companies like Applix, TAT, Wind River. So what about now the Android development? What's different? I would say three things. First, the limited resources. A mobile phone is not a computer, even if mobile phones nowadays are very powerful. And one of the limits is the battery capacity. You have to know that every clock tick of the processor, every refresh of the memory, every backlit of a pixel on the screen will take energy from the battery. Not a big deal for a laptop, but you have to consider that on a mobile phone. So battery size is limited, and as a developer you need to take that into account. So basically the computed resources are limited, and the clock rates are only in the hundreds of megahertz, which is going to impact the way you are developing. The second point, mashups or reusability if you prefer. In other mobile environments, applications are separate. Maybe the web browser is an exception, but you are expected to code what your application is doing. Here on this platform it's really different, and one of the maybe greatest example is Google Map that you can very easily integrate in your application. We're going to learn how to do that. And the third point would be the interchangeable applications. For example, if you want to send an email, you do not directly connect to the email program on the phone, because there may be 5, 10 email programs. You just ask the operating system for a piece of software that is able to send an email. So these are for the main differences. And that's it for this brief Android introduction. In this chapter we're going to prepare our Android development environment. We're going to do a little bit of downloading, of installing and of configuring, but when we'll be done, we'll have everything we need to start coding. We'll be able to start developing thanks to the editor and the compiler. We'll have access to the technical documentation. We will also be able to test our application, and if you don't have any Android phone, not a problem. We'll use the emulator. We'll also have access to a debugging environment and to performance tools. You'll also be able to sign your application in order to distribute it. For most developers, what's different when developing with Android is the fact that the environment you're using to develop is different than the environment you're using to run your application. If you are a GNU Linux, a Mac or Windows developer, usually the environment you're using to develop is the same used or very close to the one used to run your application. Here, of course, it's different. You probably don't want to code directly on your telephone. The keyboard and the screen of your computer will be much more comfortable. Until you are really free of bug, we will develop and test on the emulator. And then, when you'll be really ready, you'll test on your telephone. And if possible, if you want to do a proper QA, you will test on different models of Android phones to make sure the application behavior doesn't change. Now, what are we going to need to start developing? In most cases, developers use an integrated development environment, and usually Eclipse. That's what we are going to use here, and that's what I recommend. Eclipse is not the Android development environment. Eclipse is a development environment, but thanks to plugins and tools, at any time we'll have access to all the tools we need. But once again, what will we need? We need Java. Combined with XML, Java is the Android development language. Then we'll need Eclipse. We'll need the Android SDK, Software Development Kit, and we'll need ADT, the plugin I was mentioning a couple of seconds ago. Here we go. We're going to start with the Java development environment, and I'm talking about the Java development environment. Not only the GRE, the runtime environment, we need the JDK, development environment. You can go directly to send.java.com. Then you click on Downloads, then on Top Downloads, and you will see different version. You will probably want to download the Java SE here in version 6. But if you are an expert Java developer, you may also download the Enterprise version. Now a comment for Mac developers. You don't need to listen to what's following because Java is already there installed on your computer. For the GNU Linux users, you will probably want to choose the Linux self-extract file. And for Windows users, I will recommend the Windows offline installation multi-language. Now that Java is installed, we are going to take care of Eclipse. w3.eclipse.org. We will click on Downloads, and you'll see multiple versions. As I said earlier, Eclipse is a multi-purpose developing environment. You can use it for C, for C++, Ruby, PHP, actually whatever you want. Here you can choose the Eclipse IDE for Java developers or the Enterprise Edition. The version we're going to use is version 3.5, which codename is Galileo. And now it's Android's turn. We're going to need to download the SDK. We can go to developer.android.com. In the download category, you will see a Windows, Mac, and Linux version. Make sure you know exactly where you extract the SDK, and you'll see a tools directory. You need to add this directory to the path of your system. For Linux, it's quite simple. You're going to go to your home directory, and you'll see a .bash_profile or .bashrc. You'll see your path environment variable. You will add semicolon and the complete path for tools. On macOS, it's about the same thing, but it's a .bashrc file that you're going to edit. If it doesn't exist, you can create it. Now for Windows users, it's a little bit more tricky, but I'm going to give you the recipe. Right-click on my computer, then you click on Properties, and then on Advanced tab, and then on Environment Variable. You will see a dialog box. Double-click on Path, and then here you will have the complete path for the tools directory. Once again, right-click on my computer, select Properties, then Advanced tab, then Environment Variable, double-click on Path, and then you have the complete path for the tools directory right in there. If everything is okay, and as I will show you right here, wherever you are on your file system, you should be able to execute the Android tools. And let's try with one of them, ADB. And this is the result you should get. This being done, we're now going to take care of ADT. ADT, Android Developer Tools, is this plugin that will allow us to develop Android applications using Eclipse. That's going to be our last step. So I'm starting Eclipse, and we're going in Help, Install New Software, and here you can see that there are already a number of downloading sites. I'm going to add a new one. I will name it android.adt. For the URL, it's going to be https://dl-ssl.google.com/android/eclipse. So we can just confirm here. And so we want the Android development tools. Next. And I will probably have to validate the installation. Confirm that I accept that the packages have not been signed. And the installation is now done. I will now restart Eclipse, which is being done. And now we can make sure that under Windows you have now the Android SDK and the AVD Manager. Now, Eclipse and ADT are installed. They communicate with each other, but this being said, the SDK of Android and Eclipse are ignoring themselves because we have not indicated Eclipse where to find the SDK. So just go to the preferences and then click on Android and make sure to fill in the SDK location. You see where it is on my Mac. On your computer it may be different. Once it's done, you can go back in the Android SDK Manager. AVD means Android Virtual Device, and here you can see that on my machine I already have a virtual device configured. Android 2.1 API 11.7. It's probably not the case on your computer, so we're going to download the different versions of the APIs and configure a device. For that, you will go to Available Packages, and then you'll be able to download the different version. I would recommend that you download all of them, even if it's can be a little bit long to download, but it's the only way to test your application on the different version of the API, so on different version of an Android phone.
But of course, if you're developing for one phone and only one phone, then just download the one you need, it's fine. Once it's done, you can go install packaged, and it can take a couple of minutes to download all that stuff. You will have the Android documentation, API 7 in this case, the Android SDK tool version 4, Android APIs, and the Google APIs as well. We now have everything we need to create a device, to create a virtual device. First, I will remove the one I have on my computer, which is done, and I will recreate it to show you the process. New, so the name. I create usually more than one device, so I like to have a meaningful name, and I usually include the Android version and the API level version. Here, level 7. For the target, so 2.1, and now we can specify size for the SD card. That's for the emulator, of course. I will use here 128 meg. You can also select a couple of gigs if you want, but you need to know that your emulator will take much longer to start. 128 is usually good. Nothing else to change. The screen is good. And now we can create this device. And usually it's something that can take a while and even freeze your computer for a couple of minutes, but usually it comes back up. Click on OK, and now I can close this virtual device manager. Now we have installed everything we need to start developing with Android. But remember, it's one thing to have a tool, it's another thing to know how to use it. So in the next chapter, we're going to see how to use this Eclipse environment efficiently, and then, but only then, we'll start really developing application, and we'll have a look on what's under the hood.
In the previous chapter, we have downloaded, installed, and configured an integrated development environment for Android. Now it's time for a quick tour. I'm starting Eclipse. For those of you who already know Eclipse and already develop using Eclipse, you will probably not learn anything from me today, so I will suggest you go directly to the following chapter. So I'm going to create a new project. I will click on File, New, Project, and here you see a dialog box that will ask me what kind of development I want to make today. So it's pre-selected, it's an Android project. Click on Next, and I have another dialog box with a lot of fields I need to fill with some information on the project. Project name is not necessarily the name of your application, it's the Eclipse name of your project. So nobody will know about it except you. Let's do baby steps. This project will be created in my workspace. It's my sandbox, my developer sandbox, in the default location. That's fine. And now I'm going to choose a build target. So it will define on which target, which device I'm going to develop and test my application. Android 2.1 for me, and it's API level 7. You can see here that the minimum SDK version to run my application will be the SDK version 7. Application name, so here baby steps. For the package name now, it's the Java package name in which I'm going to code today. I will choose com.voxisland, and then I will create a new activity. We'll see what an activity is very soon. What you need to know right now is an activity is a screen on your application, one of the screens of your application. You also need to know that an activity is a Java class. So here I need to provide a Java class name. I will start with a capital B and baby steps. Now I can go further and click on finish. Now I can start to see what the environment has created for me. In baby steps, I see that there's already a number of files and directories. Let's start with source, src, and here I see a Java package, com.voxisland. Let's see, and of course here I see baby steps.java, the class or the activity I've created. I double click here and I'm opening this file. And here I see code, Java code. Yes, indeed, the environment has created for me an application skeleton. So I'm curious, you're probably curious too. So what does it look like, an application skeleton? So I can try to run it. I'm going to click on this button, specify that I want to run an Android application. And then nothing's happening, apparently. Oh yeah, now the emulator is here. I must mention that it's going to take a while. On the very first time you're loading the emulator is really loading, interpreting the Android operating system. So basically it can take, let's say, 2 to 5 minutes, but then it will stay open on your computer, and we will go back and forth between Eclipse and the emulator. I would recommend you use the emulator, try its different features, because you are going to spend a lot of time in this tool. It's ready now. So I can say I have an Android phone. It's half charged and apparently it's locked. So I'm going to unlock it, which is done, and I have my application, the Baby Steps application, which is saying hello world, baby steps. This means without writing a single line of code, I already have my very first application, the very basic hello world application. Now I'm going back in my development environment, and we can see that I have a number of lines in this console, which is showing me what is going on, especially in the emulator, what happened. I see that the application package installation, a successful installation, and the start of the activity. Now, so here is the code. So basically this is your editor. We would not necessarily spend much time right now on declaration and Javadoc, we'll see that later, but we'll go in problems. Here we will see the different errors and different warnings you may have in your application. So for example, let's say I'm going to make a mistake and remove this. I'm trying to run the application, I'm saving it, and here it's saying that I cannot execute something that contains errors. So let's see what we have here. Okay, I have a problem in baby steps in this class. In line 1 I have a syntax error, and apparently there's a missing semicolon. So I'm going to fix it, and as you've seen, let's make another mistake. So I'm going to get rid of this one. No need to rerun or recompile your application. You already have an indication here. It's a very serious warning. It's a syntax error. So I can make as many mistakes as I want. I will have as many warnings or errors. So you can consider that your code is constantly compiling. The environment is really watching you and will show you in real time warnings and errors. So I'm fixing my code, and as you see, it's gone. Now I'm going to give you 3 seconds because there are 3 things that you should notice. First, see here, you see that in the path to my application code, this path is marked in red. This is an easy way to see, to know what's going on and what's wrong in your application while you're coding it. Second thing, even if I fixed my mistake here, I still have the error right here in my problem tab. And the third thing, here this warning is not red anymore, but it's still there. It's gray. It's just because, look here, it's just because I didn't save my code, which I'm going to do right now, and everything's gone. The mark here, even here, and there's no more problem indicated here. So today we're not going really to explore the different files and directories of your projects. That's what we're going to do in the next chapter. We're going to explore the development environment. So here you see the hierarchy, and just made a mistake. I just double click instead of clicking. This is something you will probably do a lot when beginning using Eclipse. Not a problem, it's very easy to fix. I look at what I'm doing, just click here, and I think everything is going back to normal. So in this hierarchy, globally it's a view on all my objects, and you can match what's in the hierarchy tab and what's in the code. And I also have view on the different methods right here. We'll see that in more details later. We'll see task list later also, but we can have a look on outline right now. Here you see the structure of your code, which will be very convenient. We have a very small application here, but once we'll have hundreds, thousands of lines, it will be very convenient to go there and to go directly in the class you need and in the method that you want to see, to read, to fix, or to understand, or whatever. So keep that open. It's going to be useful very soon. So we're not done yet. Even if we had a look at the entire screen, there's more to see. Click here, and you will see what we call perspectives. A perspective is a different view on your project. You have a CVS view, a database view. You have also a DDMN perspective. It's DDMS is basically what is allow you to access what's inside your Android phone while it's running. You will be able to access and see the threads, the processes, the CPU, the memory utilization, so very useful to check the performance of your application, and can be useful as well to do debugging. So debugging environment here, many different Java perspectives. You may not have as much as I have here, it's okay, and many other different perspectives. The XML one is right here. We will not necessarily look at all of them. We will just focus on the one we're going to use here in this training, those are the most important ones. So unfortunately one of which we're going to use from time to time is the debugging one. We are not perfect. Our code will not be perfect at the very first time, so let's have a look at the debugging perspective. So it's a different view of what we're doing. You have the console right here and the code here. It's a smaller panel, so that you have rooms for other things like debugging informations here. We'll see that in action in the debugging chapter, but it's just a preview here. You will have the access to the variables and the breakpoints in this panel. You will have the outline panel and the logcat, which is going to be very, very useful to know what's going on in your emulator or on your phone. So let me maximize this panel. The logcat is basically, I would say, the syslog of the Android phone. So you will have really a lot of information, which can make it a little bit difficult to read, but you have different levels. So you need to filter and get what you need. So here you see really a lot of information, even if we have done not much with our emulator. So you have debugging information, you have warnings, and these are filters, and you have an error filter. You can clean the log, and you can, so filtering is just basically clicking on one of those buttons. Here you only have the errors, the PID in this column. Tag will tell you who's logging what, and the what is of course in the message column. So sometimes it's very easy to read, sometimes needs some investigation. You have here the warning filter, and it's sometimes, well, I would recommend you go on and check the errors, then the warning, then the information, then the debugging, until you understand what's going on or what's wrong, or until you get the information you're really looking for. So you need to know that when you click on warning, for example, you have also the errors. When you click on verbose, you have all the different layers, the debug, the info, the warning, and the error. Okay, so have a look. You'll have debugging information even if you have no issue on your application. And as you can see, it's not very useful once it's in the very small panel like this one, but you'll use logcat a lot. So as I mentioned, let's keep the debugging to for another chapter. This was just to give you a preview, a very basic preview on this perspective. We're now going to go to the DDMS, where you have details of what's going on in your phone or in your emulator. You have the processes here, and you have an emulator controller right here. So what can we do with that? Okay, let me do that. It's gonna be easier. You can set up the speed. You can basically set up the emulator, the speed, the latency. You can change the data, the voice. You can simulate an incoming call so that you see how your application is reacting when it's running and an incoming call is delivered to your phone. Okay, you can also change the location of the emulator. If your application is using the GPS, for example, it's what you're going to use to feed your emulator with a position and proceed with your simulation. So it's basically here that you will communicate with the emulator. The locale is here. The threads are not enabled right now, but that's where you will see the different threads and processes of your application. You can also have a look and explore the files on your telephone. The next perspective will be the XML one. So we will do Java and we will do XML as well. So this perspective is going to be very useful when we'll do, for example, when we'll build layout. A layout is what is describing how physically you're building the screen in your application. So the outliner is here, the code is here, so it's going to be all XML here, and you will have an access to the different properties here to facilitate the coding, and still in real time a view on the different problems your code may have. Now we are back in the Java perspective, and we're going to have a deeper look in an Android project. In this skeleton, actually, we're going to see what are the different files and what are the different directories this project is made of, and we're going also to have a look into the code that has been generated for us. But that's for the next chapter. We're done with this one, where we had a first quick look at the integrated development environment. So I'll talk with you in the next chapter. In the previous chapter, we have created the first Android application. Eclipse with ADT has created an application skeleton for us that we tried with the emulator. Now we're going to have a look into what's inside this project. Let's start with the source directory, src, where you can see our com.voxisland package, and inside the babysteps.java, so the class that you've seen before. I can also see what's inside, and I see the class itself, and I can go a little bit deeper and see the different methods. Here there's only one, on create. So I'm going to open the code, and we are going to have a look into what's there. The very first line, you see that this class belongs to our com.voxisland package. And then we see one import. We are importing android.app.voxisland, but here, clicking on plus, see the other imports that may be there. This class, baby steps, like you see, is extending activity. This baby steps class define, well, actually override the on method create, a public method of this class, so a public method of activity, which is executed when you launch this activity. This onCreate method receives a bundle. We'll see what a bundle is later on. What you can remember right now is that a bundle is a set of variables that will remind that will be the memory of the application and remind the state of the application. So this method will first call the onCreate method of its parent class, the activity class, using super, and pass the bundle, and then use set content view of an object, a layout, with a special name r.layout.main, and very soon we'll talk about that. Now let's have a look into the imports, one for activity, one from bundle. Let's say I just forget the second one. Then I would not be able to compile, but here you have some kind of help. You have first a warning here. The method onCreate of type baby steps it cannot be resolved. And if I move the cursor just here, I have some help. The environments propose me different options. The first one, for example, import the bundle. The second, create the bundle. So we're going to import the bundle. That's what is missing here. The import is there. The error has disappeared. I'm making the error again, just to show you that I can very easily fix all the import issues. I can ask Eclipse to import all the classes that are missing. It's organize imports. On Mac there is a short key for that, which is Shift Command O. If you are using another system, there will be probably also a short key. You're going to see that I will use that a lot because it's very convenient to import the classes you're missing on the fly. Another thing very interesting that I'm going to show you right here is this autocompletion. R, which is an object, dot, and then the environment is showing me what is making sense, which for me is going air.layout dot. Once again, I have some help here. So air.layout.main. Very convenient. So save that, and we're going to go to the gen directory where I see my package, and I see a r.java file. So I see a R object. So what is it? First, as mentioned in the very first line, this file is auto-generated by the system, and you should never modify it. You can see this R file as a set of pointers, and I mean pointers to your objects, the objects you have created, like graphical objects, strings. It's very convenient. You don't have to know where your objects are. You can call them directly because they will be referenced automatically in this R class. So you will see when we use it how convenient it is. Next, we can go in the Android 2.1 directory. Well, here you see many different classes that are embedded in a jar file. Okay, so this of course is the Android API, and this file itself is a pointer to the API, so to the SDK. You do not have to modify anything here. You will never modify any file here, but it's worth a look. You can check some classes if you want, see how classes are built, for example. And here I'm opening it just for the purpose of this demonstration. I'm opening a class. So this is allowing the environment to compile your code. Now let's talk a little bit about this assets folder. Just a little bit, because in this training I'm not sure I'm going to use it a lot. This is basically where you're going to store objects that are external to your applications. For example, fonts or an external jar file. We can have a look at the res, the resource folder now that we're going to use a lot. You see drawable subdirectories and an icon there, so basically it's for PNG, GIF, JPEG, and you see a layout directory and a value directory. So let's talk a little bit about the MVC model on which the Android development is built on, and it's a model that is used by the most recent programming languages. MVC stands for Model View Controller, and wants you to do a segregation between the model, in other words your data, the controller, in other words what is modifying the data, the code itself, and the view, in other words the display. Okay, that's what we see here. The layout is the display, basically XML files which are going to define the different screens of your application. Here we have a main.xml. I'm going to open it. I will just maximize this part of the screen, and I'm also going to configure it in portrait mode. So we have a view, so the layout with two tabs here, layout and XML. So let's have a look at the XML version. You can choose to draw your layout, literally draw your layout with the graphical tool, or to code it directly in XML. You can also choose to use both of those technologies. Usually beginners try to use the graphical tool, but then you'll see that the more you use it and the more you get used to programming with Android, the more you will probably use the XML, since there's a lot of shortcuts to quickly code your layout. So we have on those two tabs exactly the same layout. I have a line here, hello world, hello Android, and we have a button. Let's check our XML layout. We have a linear layout, which is containing a text view, and which contains also a button that is defined right here. Okay, we're going back in the layout, and we're going to make sure we have exactly the same thing here. Indeed, here we have a layout, a linear layout. That's the first item, aka the root item. We have an orientation, and for a linear layout it can be vertical or horizontal. And this linear layout is holding a text view and also contains a button. If I want to add a button, I can very easily take a button here and drop it here. I can also go in the main.xml. I can also go directly coding the XML version of it in this file. Now, I know it's arguable, but I would say this button is not as pretty as the previous one, since it's not the same size. And I have two ways to change that. I can select the button and go in its properties. You can see, for example, its ID right here. There are a lot of properties with absolutely no value. Here you have the text of this button, which I can change for hello, for example. And you can see that the size of the button, well, this button is wrapping the content. So let's go down, and in the layout properties, you can see that this button is configured to wrap its content. So I'm going to change that. So it's wrapping the content for the height and for the width. So I'm going to show you how to change that in the XML. I see my button here with the different properties. The layout width is wrap content, and I will change it and the editor will help me, showing me the different options. I will choose fill parent. I can save, go back in the layout, and I have a button that has exactly the same size. Now let's go back in our baby steps application, especially in the class itself. This application, or at least its layout, contains a text and two buttons. You can execute it. Now I'm calling my emulator Hello World, Hello Android, one button and one second button. Now, where Hello World, Hello Android is coming from? Where does it come from? Because if I check the code of my application, nowhere I have a string with Hello World, Hello Android. So it's again because of the MVC model, where I need to segregate my code, my display, and my data. So if I go in my layout, let's see what is supposed to be printed in this text view. The text view is this line right here. So let's see the properties. The layout and the content is @string/hello. So I think it's almost the end of the mystery, because now we're going to see what's in the values directory, and we have a strings.xml. So here also you have two ways to modify strings.xml directly here in this XML editor, and we see the string hello with the text Hello World, Hello Android. Okay, I'm going to change that for Hello Chapter 3 or Chapter 4. I will keep the name as Baby Steps. I could have made exactly the same change using the Resources tab. I can access the hello string. I see the name of the string and its value. I can also add different items to this strings.xml. I'm going back in my layout, and indeed this string has changed. So I'm sure you got it. You're supposed to put all the different constant variables in this values folder. I am not necessarily going to do that each and every time in this training, just for the purpose of saving time. But just remember that it's a good practice to do so. Now let's have a look to Android manifest.xml. This file is very important. It's so important that ADT will give you a special editor for it. Of course, you can check what's in this file in this tab, but you will see different other tabs. So here it is. This file will contain many different information on your application. For example, what are the different activities? Which one should start first? What are the services, the intents that we're going to see later? What are the permissions required to run this application? If, for example, your application needs the GPS positioning data, then we will need to get them from the OS, and the OS will ask permission to the user. And as you can see, there is a permissions folder right here. Okay, we're not going to detail everything right now. It's on the fly that from time to time we'll have to go and change the Android manifest properties. So this file is right now very small, but you'll see that this file will grow when you're developing the different classes of your application. Now the last file, or almost the last file, default properties. So as you can see here, this file is generated automatically by ADT. You will never edit it. It just contains information that all the tools needs to interact with your interaction. I said almost done because let's go in my workspace, Documents workspace on my computer. I will go in my project Baby Steps, or Baby Steps, and I will check the content of this directory And indeed, I see my Android manifest.xml and the other files and directory we have seen so far. I also see that there is a bin directory, and this directory will contain the result of the compilation of my code. In other words, we'll find here Java bytecode. And then if I ask my system to show me all the files, including the hidden files, I see other files, .classpath, .project, and .settings. Well, if they are hidden, it's just because you don't need to see them. No need to modify them. They are just files created and maintained by Eclipse to store information like the different classes and libraries that you're using, or also the preferences that you set in Eclipse. And that's about it for those files. So I can just close this screen. And as you will see, we will now mainly be working in the source directory and the resource directory. That's it for this chapter. In the next chapter, we're going to start writing our first line of code. In the previous chapter, we've seen what an Android application is made of, and now we're going to create a new project and start coding. New project, Android project. I will name it Joshua. It's going to be Android 2.1, application name same, Joshua, package name com.voxisland, and let's create a first activity and let's name it simply Joshua. Here we go. We have the application. We can see what's inside and we can try to run it. Okay, I have an error here, first one. It's telling me that there's nothing to launch. The problem here is that my development environment doesn't really know when to launch. What I need to do is to open the code and then I will be able to launch it. Let's check what's on the console. I see that the installation has succeeded, and I also see that the activity has started. That sounds good. Let's have a look in the emulator, and yes, indeed I see my application. I have Hello World Joshua. So now, one more time, because that's important, that's a mistake beginners are making very easily. When you run an application, be sure that you run a file in the code that you want to run. Especially at the beginning when you're navigating between the source code and the resource code. If you try to run your application once you're here, you will have the creation of a main.out.xml and a bunch of error on the console. In this case, we'll have to delete the main.out.xml and go back to the code and rerun it. That's a very common mistake. Okay, successful, and the application is running. So the very first thing we're going to do is to change this Hello Joshua. So it's in values, strings.xml, and in the hello string, because as you know in the layout we saw that the text for this text view is at string/hello, and it's pointing us to strings.html hello just here, and we'll replace this with greetings Professor Falcon. I'm saving. Now I'm going back in the joshua.java and I'm running the application. Application is there, and now it says greetings Professor Falcon. Wonderful. So it will be nice and we're going to answer this application. For that, we'll need a button. As we've seen, we're going in the layout, and we'll just add a button. Two ways to do that. This is the first way. We'll change its property here, or I'm removing it to show you the second way, the one I prefer personally. Coding it in XML. So let's create a button, and let's define now the different properties. Let's start with Android layout width, and we'll set that to fill parent. Now the layout height, and that is going to be wrap content. Now we'll need to set an ID for that button. Okay. Here we're going to create an ID, and I will intentionally make a mistake here. So I will just forget the ID. So add plus / my button. Then we'll set up some text. So we'll leave it blank for now, and we will create a string here. Let's name it answer. Let's say hello Joshua. I'm saving this, going back here, and let's point now to add string / answer that I've just created. Now let's check the layout. It's going to be better in portrait mode. Greetings, Professor Falcon. Hello, Joshua. Perfect. Now let's start this application. I'm about to click when I see here that there's something wrong. Layout cannot be resolved. That's a strange error. So let's see what's wrong here, because this error is not easy to understand based on this warning. What you need to understand here, that your R class is kind of corrupted because of the modification we just made. So it's going to be easy. Let's go check what mistake we made here. So I did that on purpose. In the layout here, the layout is corrupted actually. It's not showing a warning here, but the mistake is here. So when you create a new ID, it's at plus ID / and the name, or your R file is going to be corrupted. Okay, that's fixed. The main XML code is now correct. And let's go back in the Java file. Let's run it. No more error. Let's see what we have here. Just perfect. I have a Hello Joshua button. I can click on the button. But if I click on the button, there's no reaction. Just because we never told the application what to do if we click on the button, and that's what we're going to do right now. So you see that in the Joshua class we have defined what to do when we create this activity. On create, we create the parent on create, and we set the view. So we set content view. There's no button here. The button has been created, yes, but it's been created in the layout, not in the Java code. So what we'll do right here is defining a button. The button is an object. Its class is simply button. So we'll name it My Button, same thing as in the display, but I can choose another name if I want. And we'll say that it's a new object button, and I will cast it into button, and we'll look for it. We'll try to find it. What we know about it is its name in the layout, and we also know that there is a OR class, not corrected awfully, which contain pointers to the different objects I've created. So we're going to do find view. Well, basically a view is a widget, so a graphical widget. So find view by ID, r.id dot, and we have my button here. So semicolon, and I just created my button. So I've got a warning here. Let's see. The issue here is that I'm using button, but I've not imported the button class. So I'm importing it, and there's another warning. Let's check. So the interface is proposing me to remove my button because I've created a button and I'm not using it. So the system thinks it's useless. But I know I'm going to use it, so I will just ignore that message. Now what we have to do is coding the button's behavior. First, we'll need to create a button listener. What is it? It's a method that is going to be called when we click on the button, and the listener itself will run the code that I will provide. So let's create this listener. It's an object that is in the button class. It's button dot on click listener, and we'll call it my listener, and we'll say that it's a new button on click listener. Semicolon here, and I just created my listener. Okay, there's something wrong. You'll see what it is. Cannot instantiate. So there's something missing. What's missing is, well, I said that I need to provide some code that will be run when I click on the button, and I'll provide the code this way. It's empty. I've got another warning, and it's saying that I must implement the uniterated method. So let's do what's suggested here, add unimplemented methods. Sounds good. And if I do that, it's creating for me an on-click method that I need to provide. So that's the code that will run when I click on the button. So here, I'm just going to display a message. It's going to be a toast message. You see, it's easy to use. It will just pop up a small message on a screen for a couple of seconds. So toast is an object. Toast dot, and I will ask this class to create a toast message. So make text. And I need to provide 3 parameters here: context, text, and duration. For the context, usually you use this, but you see there's a problem with that. For the text, I will use, let's say, write Joshua's answer. Would you like to play a game of chess? And for the duration, we're going to use a toast constant. We have basically 2 options: long display or short display. So whatever, let's use short. And I just use long actually. So what's wrong with this? Well, you need to know that it's not really this that we're going to use here. Since we're not directly in the activity class, we are currently in a listener. So we're going to use Joshua.this, which is a real context of this activity. So be careful with that. So we have just created a toast object, and we forgot to ask it to display it, and I've added the .show function. So now it's going to show on the screen. Okay? Now we have a button. I have it's not used for anything yet. As mentioned here, we have a listener, same thing, not used either. And now we need to connect the button and the listener. So just to have a better view on the code, I will try to minimize this. And usually when I do that, I do a lot of mistakes. Okay, I'm almost there. Not yet. Okay, let's move that a little bit also. Okay, that's a little bit better. So we'll go here after the listener creation, and we'll link the listener and the button. For that, we'll use a button method, which is set on click listener, and I will provide the listener object. So here, my listener, semicolon here. I'm saving. I see that there is apparently no problem in my code, so let's try it. Let's see. Okay, perfect. Greetings, Professor Falcon. And when I click, I have the answer. That was here the toast message. That's what I was expecting. So I can say that the application behavior is good, but myself as a developer, is my behavior good? Not really. First, I broke one of the rules of the MVC model, since I have hard-coded something here. I'm bad. And I also forgot the exclamation mark, so we're going to fix that. I will copy the text, and I will add it here, of course, in the string XML. As I said, I'm not necessarily going to do that any time, but you should do that every time. So I will name it Joshua answer. And the content will be, would you like to play a game of chess? And now in the code, it's coming. In the code I will remove this hard-coded string, and I will use r.id. Well, not exactly. There's my button and class here. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, it's very simple. ID, r.id, is for graphical resources that we have created in the layout. That's what we have done so far. So here we need r dot, and we have, as you can see, string here. So let's use r dot string dot Joshua answer. That sounds good. So let me save it, and let's try. So it should be the same application, but a better code. Okay, that's good. Okay, now let's go back a little bit and let's recap. So we have created a button, we have created a listener, and in this listener we have overridden the onClick method. And in this onClick method we are creating a toast message, and we show it, and then we linked our button and our listener. Okay, it may look a little bit tedious and a little bit long as a code, but I will show you how to save some space and save some time too. So saving some space is what I'm doing right now, not too difficult. Now let's think a minute. Let's think about what we have created. We have created a My Listener. Do we really need to create an object, a button on-click listener object named My Listener? Not really. What's in My Listener? In there I put an on-click listener. So I'm going to copy that. Okay. Now I'm going to delete the creation of My Listener and just replace the variable My Listener with the creation of the listener. I'm saving. I'm still removing some extra space. So let's save. Okay, it's arguable, but to me it's a little bit more readable this way. Okay, I hope you're proud of what we've built. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of Java code, a little bit of XML, and we have an application that is really doing something. An application that says hello and to which we can answer. In the next chapter, we're going to improve this application. I'll see you there. In the previous chapter, we have started creating the Joshua application. Here it is. It's a small app that allows us to have a little talk with our computer or our phone. It says, "Greetings, Professor Falcon." You can click on "Hello, Joshua," and then we have an answer. You see what I've added here. I've added 3 labels, actually 3 text views technically, and buttons. When I click on the red one, then Joshua's greetings turn red, same thing for green, and same thing for blue. So we're just improving a little bit the previous application. So now you are aware of our goal for this chapter. The very first thing we're going to do is to set up the layout. The very first item of this layout in the hierarchy, the one that we call the root item, is a linear layout. A linear layout is basically a container that will show the items the one after each other horizontally or vertically, depending on the orientation. We'll have so a text, a button, 3 labels, and 3 radio buttons. Okay, so let's have a deeper look now. We'll have a first linear layout, vertical linear layout. Then we'll have a text view with the greetings. Then we'll have 3 labels, actually 3 text views, red, green, and blue. And we'll make sure that the font color will be black so that it can be readable. And of course, then we'll have those 3 radio buttons, but not 3 independent radio buttons. We'll have 3 radio buttons that will be included in a radio group. Okay, perfect. We know what we want to do. Now we're going either to draw this structure, this layout with the graphical tool, or use the XML editor. So here we are in the XML editor, main.xml. The first thing we're going to do is to make sure that there's no issue with the existing code. For what we want to do, we have a first linear layout, it's a vertical one, then a text view, and a button. Everything looks good. This being said, something's missing. At one time we will want to change the color of this text view. So in our Java code we will have to create a text view object and do a search with find view by ID. And that's the problem. There's no ID here. So I'm going to create one. Android ID equals, and I'm going to call it my message. That's perfect. Now we can start creating an horizontal linear layout. And this linear layout is our container that will include our three labels. So linear layout, Android for the width we'll use fill parent. For the height I will set it as 20 pixels. I don't want this to take all the screen. And I will define the orientation horizontal. So inside this layout I'm going to create my first text view. So the red one. So it's a text view. I know I'm going to surprise you a little bit, but for the layout width I will use fill parent. And let's see what it's doing. Android layout height fill parent. It will take all the available space, that is to say 20 pixels here. Now I'm going to define the font color. Oh, the background color first. Let's do background, and it's like in HTML or CSS. So FF0000 stands for red. And now let's do the text color. And we said we wanted it to be black. And the text itself, so I'm going to hard code it, but you should not do that. You know that you should create an entry in the strings.xml or any other value file. But as I mentioned, I'm not going necessarily to do that in this training, just for the purpose of saving time. We have to take also into account that we're only building demos here. So that's the first text view. I'm just using copy-paste to create the two other text views, changing the color for green and blue. And now I'm saving and I'm gonna check the result. Well, not necessarily what I was expecting, even in portrait mode. But that's not very surprising, because here, for the first text view, I have a fill parent width, so it's taking all the space. So here I'm going to introduce a new concept and set up a layout weight equals to 1. Same thing for the green button and same thing for the blue button. So let's see what it's doing. So I'm saving, I'm checking, and it's a little bit better. So the weight concept, it's a ratio, and they all have a weight of 1. So let's add all those numbers. 1 plus 1 plus 1, that's 3. They all have 1 as a weight, so a ratio of 1/3 actually. So it's just spreading the available space evenly. Now let's have a look. It's better. it's a little bit better. I will probably want to center the content of those text views, which is easy. New concept, gravity. So the vocabulary is different, but the concept is the same one as in CSS. Okay, here we're going to use center. Same thing for the green button. Same thing for the blue button. Saving. Checking. It looks good. Now I will create my radio group that will contain our three radio buttons. Let's do that. So of course we'll start after the closing of this linear layout. That's a radio group. Layout with fill parent. We're going to use the same weight trick. So for the height, we're going to say wrap content. No need to space. We need to take the entire available space. We're gonna set an ID, and we're going to call this guy my radio group. And let's not forget to set up the orientation. And we want it to be horizontal. Perfect. I will now create my first button. So it's a radio button. Android with... Okay, I like when the editor is helping me. I'm a little bit lazy. So fill parent for the width. Layout height fill parent. So for the same as for the text views, we're going to set up a layout weight equal 1. We are going to set up an ID. My radio button red. And now we can close this first radio button and create 2 new ones with copy and paste. Green, blue. I just save it and I check. It's almost correct. The radio buttons are not using the gravity property, and I'm going to use a margin, layout, margin left, and we're using 35 dp. We'll talk about that, the dp concept. Same thing for the 2 other buttons. I'm saving, checking, and it seems that we're done. So let's talk about those dp. But we'll also need to talk about the px, in, mm, pt, and sp. We have already used px, pixels. So 20 pixels are 20 real pixels on your screen. So from one photo to another, the space 20 pixels can take may be different depending on the resolution of the screen and the size of the screen. If you want a real measure in inches or millimeters, you're going to use IN or mm for millimeters. You can use PT, it's a point. You have probably used points in the past with word processors. This is a definition. A point is a 1/72th of an inch. That's something we are not going to use very often, very honestly. But we're going to use DP and SP. So first, a DP is a density independent pixels. It's an abstract unit that is based on the physical density of the screen. These units are relative to a 160 dpi screen, which is not the case for all the screens. So 1 dp is 1 pixel on those screens, and the ratio of dp to pixel will change with the screen density, of course, but not necessarily in the direct proportion. And you have to note that the compiler accepts both dip and dp, but dp is more consistent with SP. So SP, the scale independent pixels, it's like the DP unit, but it is also scaled by the user's font size preference. It is recommended that you use this unit when specifying font size, just so that they will be adjusted for both the screen density and the user's preference. Basically, I like big characters on my computer, on my phone. Then you should use big characters in your application, and that's what we're going to do with using SP. So I know it's a lot of information, but you'll see it's easy to use. Okay, now let's go back to our programming, and let's do the Java programming since we're done with the XML. First thing, we're going to create the different objects that we're going to need, and we're going to define them here, just here, and you will understand why. So our first text view, my message, and then we will need a listener for our radio group. So it's going to be an object of on-click listener type, and we'll call it my radio click listener. So I'm importing the missing classes. So here there's a small issue. Oh no, here what's interesting is Eclipse doesn't know which one, which class to import. Eclipse has a doubt. So it's telling me that it could be a view on-click listener. It could also be a dialog interface on-click listener. Of course, for us here it's the first one. And now I will look for those objects with the find view by ID, my message, so find by view ID or .id my message. Okay, next. So now my radio click listener. So these are pretty big variable names, so I'm using control space to have the auto-completion. So my radio click listener equals new on-click listener. and I'm going to ask the import of the class, or what's okay, and the unimplemented methods, of course. And perfect. And there's something wrong here. It's not find yeah, okay, it's find view by ID. Really, I mistyped that. So the unimplemented method is onClick, and let's save some space here. Perfect. So what are we going to do here when the listener will take control of the application? It's going to run this onClick with this parameter. The parameter is v, which is a view. View is a generic object, but we as a developer, we know that it's going to be a radio button. So we just cast this object just because it's making sense. So it's a cast of a radio button. So when we'll be there, we will know that a radio button has been clicked. Now, which one? That's what will tell us my radio button dot get what? Get ID. Now, we're going to have a different behavior if the radio button clicked is the red one, the green one, or the blue one. So, of course, we're going, and that's why I removed the semicolon. We're going to use a switch. In the case of the red button, so the ID will be r.id.myRadioButtonRed. Well, in this case, I will do my message, and I will change the color. So set text color, and here we can use a constant, which is in the color class, color.red, and then break. Of course, same code for, almost the same code for the green button and the blue button. I'm saving, and now I'm importing the color class that was missing. I'm saving, and now that's done. I've created my radio click listener. Now I'm not going to create 3 different listeners. I cannot have an object with 3 listeners, but I can have a listener attached to 3 different objects, and that's what I'm going to do here. So the same listener for all the 3 different radio buttons. So first, of course, I need to create those radio buttons. So let's be short here. RB red, RB green, RB blue. I'm importing the radio button object. Let's say that RB red is what's gonna get me find you by ID with r.id.myRadio button red. That's it. Okay. Now same thing for green. I said green, and same thing for blue. Okay. Of course, I need to change that also. And now I just have to connect the buttons with the listeners. Sorry, I have to connect the buttons with the listener, only one. So for the red button, set onClick listener, I'm going to do the same thing for the two other radio buttons. I'm saving, and I'm going to run the application. So now let's switch to the emulator. Here it is. So let's first make sure I didn't break anything. I click here and I still have the would you like to play a game of chess? Perfect. And when I click on the radio buttons, yes, it's changing the color of the gratings. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to do. So that's it for this chapter. As you can see, there are a lot of mechanical stuff when programming Android applications. So a very good exercise for you would be to get familiar